Scotland in the 1960s was haunted by a name that echoed through the streets of Glasgow. His name was Bible John. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment where you're watching from. So, sit back as we go to Scotland. Patricia Docker was born on 19th May 1942 in Glasgow, Scotland. By the late 1960s, she was 25 years old. She worked as a nursing auxiliary at a hospital in Glasgow. She was married to Alex Docker, a former soldier. The couple had a son named Alex Jr., who was 4 years old. According to sources, the marriage was troubled. Alex Docker was frequently absent. Patricia lived with her parents at Langside Place in Glasgow. Glasgow in the late 1960s was a vibrant city. The post-war years had brought changes. New housing estates were being built. The shipyards still employed thousands. The city's dance halls were popular destinations for young people looking to socialize. The Barrowland Ballroom in the Gallowgate was one of the most famous. It attracted hundreds of people every week, particularly on Thursday nights when live bands played. Thursday, 22nd February 1968, Patricia Docker left her parents' home at Langside Place. She told her family she was going dancing at the Barrowland Ballroom. She wore a blue dress and a green coat. She carried a black handbag. She left her 4-year-old son with her parents. The Barrowland was crowded that Thursday night. Patricia danced. She socialized with people. Witnesses later reported seeing her with a man, but descriptions were vague. The ballroom closed around midnight. Patricia left. She never arrived home. The next morning, Friday 23rd February 1968, a Glasgow Corporation workman discovered Patricia Docker's body in a lane off Carmichael Place in the Gorbals area of Glasgow. She was lying partially clothed. Her underwear had been torn from her body. She had been strangled. Her handbag was missing. Glasgow City Police launched a murder investigation. Detectives from the Criminal Investigation Department questioned people who had been at the Barrowland Ballroom on Thursday night. They asked if anyone had seen Patricia with a man. Some witnesses came forward. They described seeing her with a tall, well-dressed man, but the descriptions were not detailed enough to identify him. The investigation continued for weeks. Police interviewed hundreds of people, but they could not identify the killer. On the morning of Sunday, 17th August 1969, a body was discovered in a derelict tenement building at number 25 McKeith Street in the Bridgerton area of Glasgow. The woman had been strangled. Her handbag and some of her clothing were missing. The location was in a run-down part of the city where abandoned buildings stood awaiting demolition. The victim was identified as Jemima MacDonald. She had been born in 1937 in Glasgow. By 1969, she was 32 years old. According to sources, she was married and had 3 children. She lived at number 29 McKeith Street, just 4 doors away from where her body was found. The previous evening, Saturday 16th August 1969, Jemima had gone to the Barrowland Ballroom. The Saturday night dances were even more popular than the Thursday events. Witnesses reported seeing her with a man. He was described as tall and well-dressed, with reddish hair. Several people remembered that he spoke about religion and quoted from the Bible during conversations at the ballroom. Witnesses saw Jemima leave the Barrowland with this man. They were seen together in the street. Then they disappeared. The next morning, her body was found strangled in the derelict building just meters from her own home. Glasgow City Police recognised similarities to the Patricia Docker murder 18 months earlier. Both women had been at the Barrowland Ballroom shortly before their deaths. Both had been strangled. Both had items of clothing and their handbags taken. Detectives began to suspect they were looking for the same killer. Witnesses from the Barrowland came forward with more details. Several people remembered the tall man who had been with Jemima. He had quoted scripture. He had made references to morality and religious matters. The man became known in the investigation as Bible John. Police issued descriptions based on witness statements. The man was described as between 25 and 35 years old, approximately 6 feet tall, with reddish-brown hair. He was well-dressed and well-spoken. He had discussed the Bible extensively. The investigation intensified. Detectives questioned thousands of men across Glasgow. A photo-fit image was created and distributed widely. Newspapers published the image. But despite the massive investigation, Bible John could not be found. Thursday, 30th of October, 1969. Helen Puttock arranged to go dancing at the Barrowland Ballroom with her sister, Jean Williams. Jean had agreed to accompany Helen for the evening. Helen Puttock had been born in 1940. She was 29 years old. According to sources, she was married to George Puttock, a soldier serving with the Scots Guards. The couple had 2 children. George was stationed in barracks and came home only occasionally. Helen lived with her children at Earl Street in Scotstoun, Glasgow. The 2 sisters travelled to the Gallowgate that Thursday night. The Barrowland was busy. Helen and Jean danced and enjoyed themselves. During the evening, they met 2 men. Both men were well-dressed and polite. One man said his name was John. He was tall, with reddish-brown hair. He wore a well-tailored suit. He danced with Helen. The man who called himself John spoke about the Bible during conversations with Helen and Jean. He quoted scripture. He discussed morality and religion. He mentioned that his father was a strict Presbyterian who disapproved of drinking. He said he himself did not dance often because of his religious upbringing. He said he did not smoke and rarely drank alcohol. The ballroom closed around midnight. The 4 of them left together and shared a taxi. John and Helen sat in the back. Jean and the other man sat in the front with the driver. They dropped the other man off first. Then the taxi continued with John, Helen, and Jean. Jean was dropped at her home. The taxi driver later testified that he heard John give an address on Earl Street, close to where Helen lived. The taxi drove away with Helen Puttock, and the man called John still inside. That was the last time Helen was seen alive. The next morning, Friday 31st October 1969, Helen Puttock's body was discovered in her sister's back garden at number 95 Earl Street in Scotstoun. She had been strangled. Her handbag and tights were missing. This was the 3rd murder with the same pattern. Woman from the Barrowland Ballroom. Strangled. Handbag and clothing missing. But this time, there was a crucial witness. Jean Williams had spent hours with the killer. She had sat in a taxi with him. She had heard him speak at length. Jean Williams gave police a detailed description. The man was approximately 25 to 35 years old. He was around 6 feet tall. He had reddish-brown hair, neatly styled. He wore a well-tailored suit. He had good teeth. He was well-spoken with a refined Glasgow accent. He had mentioned he did not smoke and rarely drank. He had quoted the Bible extensively. He had mentioned his strict Presbyterian father. He had said his name was John. Based on Jean Williams's description, police artist Lennox Patterson created a detailed photo fit. The image was published in newspapers across Scotland and England. Wanted posters appeared throughout Glasgow. The BBC featured the case on television. Glasgow City Police launched what became the largest manhunt in Scottish history at that time. Detectives interviewed over 50,000 men. They took more than 5,000 statements. Officers went to churches across Glasgow, particularly Presbyterian congregations. They questioned men with strict religious backgrounds. They checked employment records, military records, and hospital records. The PhotoFit image showed a man with reddish-brown hair, a strong jawline, and a neat appearance. He looked respectable, well-groomed, ordinary, the kind of man who would blend into any crowd. But despite the massive investigation, Bible John was never found. 3 women murdered. Patricia Docker, 25 years old, nursing auxiliary, murdered 23rd of February, 1968. Jemima MacDonald, 32 years old, mother of 3, murdered 17th August, 1969. Helen Puttock, 29 years old, mother of 2, murdered 31st October, 1969. All 3 had been at the Barrowland Ballroom shortly before their deaths. All were strangled. All had items of clothing and their handbags taken. All were married women whose husbands were absent at the time. Based on witness statements, particularly from Gene Williams, police built a profile of Bible John. He was called this because of his habit of quoting scripture and discussing religion. He was described as approximately 25 to 35 years old in 1969, around 6 feet tall, with reddish-brown hair. He was well-dressed, well-spoken, with a refined Glasgow accent. He did not smoke and rarely drank alcohol. He had extensive knowledge of the Bible. He mentioned having a strict Presbyterian father. The murders stopped after Helen Puttock's death in October 1969. No similar killings occurred at the Barrowland Ballroom or elsewhere in Glasgow with the same pattern. Over the decades, several suspects emerged. In 2005, researcher Alec Tippett identified John Irvine McInnes as a potential suspect. McInnes had committed suicide in 1980. His family provided DNA samples to police. In 2005, Strathclyde police announced that the DNA did not match samples from Helen Puttock's clothing. McInnes was ruled out. In February 2022, police announced they were investigating Peter Tobin, a convicted serial killer who had lived in Glasgow during the late 1960s. Tobin had murdered 3 young women between 1991 and 2006. He died in prison in October 2022 without confessing to the Bible John murders. Despite advances in forensic science and decades of investigation, Bible John has never been identified. The case remains officially unsolved. The Barrowland Ballroom closed in 1998. It reopened as a concert venue in 2005. The building still stands in the Gallowgate. For many in Glasgow, it remains forever associated with Bible John and the 3 women who died after dancing there. Patricia Docker, Jemima MacDonald, and Helen Puttock were mothers, wives, daughters. They enjoyed dancing. They deserved to live. Their lives were stolen by a man who quoted the Bible and then strangled them in the darkness of Glasgow's streets. Their killer was never caught. Their cases remain unsolved. But they are not forgotten.